Okay, in Lisa's introduction to me, she mentioned that I was on the faculty at the University of Notre Dame, and I do want to mention right off the bat that I'm here actually representing the Society of Women Engineers, not the university. I'm going to use some examples from my university work in this presentation, but I just want to make that clear. And I also apologize for those of you who can't see the presentation. It was either there or on my face. So it's there, and you all have handouts. What I'm going to talk about today is Dr. Sacker mentioned some of the statistics relevant to women in STEM. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and try to put those statistics into some context so that you can have a sense of why this issue matters to those of us in the women in higher education, women in STEM communities. So since Title IX was enacted in 1972, we have seen a dramatic increase in the representation of women in all levels of education across the country. And this resulted from some things that probably are a little hard to believe ever actually existed. Certain schools had enrollment caps for women, certain programs did. Law schools and medical schools in particular would limit the number of women who would go into a program because they figured that women would just get married, have babies, quit work, and so why waste the slot on a woman who wasn't going to take advantage of it. Previously, all male institutions, such as my own, opened their doors to women in 1972, and other schools that would allow women to be in the student body but would not grant them advanced degrees, allowed them to earn advanced degrees. So as part of that, you'll see how the representation across the board at all levels of higher education has changed dramatically, particularly in the professional fields, which are medical, law, and divinity and rabbinical schools, where women have gone from 5% in 1972 to about 55% today. And on the subject of bachelor's degrees, granted, again, you've heard that women now earn 60% of all bachelor's degrees, but again, that this is a relatively new phenomenon. Women hit the 50% threshold in 1982, and the percentage has been growing ever since. But one thing this number does not account for is the number of non-traditional age women that go back to school. So out of the 18 to 25-year-old range, women who are going back for a second career, perhaps to get re-educated for a career after a divorce or something like that. But there is some unevenness across the disciplines. The fifth slide shows that if you look at all STEM fields, which would be engineering, math, computer science, physics, chemistry, and biology, women are earning only 40% of bachelor's degrees in those fields today. The number is rising, but it still is only about 40%. In biology and agricultural science, the picture's really good. Women are earning 60% of those degrees, but again, hit the 50% mark in those fields only in about 1996. So again, that's still a fairly recent phenomenon. But that is where the good news for women ends. When we move past biology to the other STEM fields, the representation of women drops off dramatically to a low of 20% in engineering. So 27% of math and computer science bachelor's degrees, 20% of engineering bachelor's degrees. And the chart for engineering shows this. The other thing this chart for engineering, which is slide number 8, shows is that since about 1984, the number of women earning bachelor's degrees in engineering has remained flat. It's between 11 and 13,000 per year. And despite the fact that over that same period of time, the percentage, or the number of women earning bachelor's degrees in any field has grown by 75%. It went from 500,000 in 1984 to 800,000 in 2006. The number of women earning bachelor's degrees in engineering has been flat. So we've actually lost ground as a percentage of women within the field of engineering. Today, women comprise 20% of engineering undergraduates, 23% of engineering master's students, and 20% of engineering PhD students. And those second and third numbers look really good until you realize that almost half of the women at those degree levels in our higher education institutions are not domestic students. And that's not a problem in and of itself, but it's a problem in the fact that non-domestic students don't stay here. So in the domestic population of students, we're only seeing about 10% of engineering master's students and engineering PhD students overall being domestic, so U.S. citizens or permanent residents in those degree programs. And women still only comprise about 12% of engineering faculty. That ticked up from 10% 2 years ago, and there have been a lot of efforts made to hire women on engineering faculties, but that's still an issue because there are no role models, or very few role models in higher education. So why does this matter? I think it's two reasons. The first is equity. Math, computer science, engineering, are among the highest paid occupations according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. If you look at data, 2007 data from the Bureau, computer programmers make approximately twice the median salary of other workers in major metropolitan areas. In any major metropolitan area, it's between 1.5 and 3 times the median salary for computer programmers. Engineering and computer information technology managers earn higher median salaries than any other management occupation dominated by men, and then all management occupations dominated by women. And in contrast, if you look at median wages for men and women, the median annual wage is below $50,000 for almost all occupations with high concentrations of women, and below the median annual wage of all occupations, which is $30,000 for many of those women's occupations. So occupations dominated by women are at lower income levels. Occupations dominated by women also happen to be in the service sector. Occupations dominated by men are in the goods-producing sector. So a lack of diverse talent in the goods-producing sector is going to hurt U.S. competitiveness. And if you add to that the fact that the Bureau of Labor Statistics also reports that the percentage of white men in the U.S. is going to shrink to about 34% of the population in the coming decades, not attracting women and ethnic minorities into engineering and the other STEM fields now is going to continue to hurt competitiveness if we're living with a field where white men dominate because that's who the field is attracting at this moment. So what do we look at with preparation? If you look at the National Assessment of Educational Progress data that was just released, we see that for at least the past 2 decades, 8th grade boys and 8th grade girls have performed equivalently on math assessment tests. College Board data in 2009, some of those alphabet soup tests people fear, reports now that high school girls are taking 55% of all advanced placement tests, roughly half of all calculus and chemistry tests, but only about a third of physics tests, and only 17% of computer science tests. So at least if you look at calculus and chemistry, we do see that we have high school students who are well prepared to engage in engineering and the physical sciences. The physics thing is a little bit of an issue, but at this point anyway, we see women gravitating towards chemical engineering and bioengineering fields anyway, so the preparation that they're getting with calculus and chemistry is preparing them well for those particular fields. We do have a large proportion of women who are prepared, and yet only 20% of our engineering enrollments right now are women. And those numbers actually really vary quite a bit across the board, from a high of 35% at a school like MIT to numbers in the 14, 13, 12% at some state schools and some technology-focused schools. My own school happens to be at 26%. We're doing fairly well, but it's a broad range across the board. Another thing we know is that women can succeed if the proper systems are in place to allow them to succeed in STEM. Some recent studies by Purdue and some others have shown that there's no difference in the retention of engineering undergraduates by gender. A lot of this is thought to be due to the presence of retention programs, such as those the Society of Women Engineers has, women in engineering and science programs that are present at a lot of schools across the country now. And a 2002 report by the Goodman Research Group has basically validated that it's not clear that you have to do a particular thing as long as you do something, and that'll help women succeed in these programs. And looking at the way women learn and socialize and modeling programs to meet these needs has helped women and has not hurt men. As Lisa mentioned when she introduced me, when I started in this current position at Notre Dame 7 years ago, the retention of women from first year to sophomore year was 40% in our engineering program. And the retention for men over that same time period was 62%, and I was hired to fix that problem. We addressed one particular curricular issue we were able to identify, switching course content from the fall semester to the spring, and addressed a housing issue that we didn't realize was going on at the university. And in 1 year, improved the retention of women to 72%, from 40% to 72%. And during that same year, the retention of men went from 62% to 72%. And we've been pretty consistent in the low 70s right now in our retention, which is pretty high for the sort of program we have. So this is, at least in our view, a way to show that you can do some improvements in the way STEM education is brought to our students that help women, and they don't necessarily hurt men, and in fact they actually do help men.